Okay, I think we're ready to get started this afternoon. And the question before us today is the translation of the word slave in the Bible.
There's three main Hebrew words to be considered. Eved is the most general, broad term that's typically rendered servant and sometimes slave. Then for women who are in servitude, typically shifcha and amah are your standard terms, and they don't all have to be handled the same way.
All right, thank you. Now, I think others who wish to...
Just a few things. Thinking of the principal male word, eved. It occurs a lot in the Bible. It's about 800 times. And the majority of those we currently have as servant. But if you were to make the word slave consistent and start using it for the verb, then you'd end up being slaves before God. You'd be slaving for him and so on. So I feel the most consistent way is to put servant everywhere.
If you look at the dictionaries, it's quite clear that the difference between a servant and a slave is whether they are owned by the master or whether they're paid by their employer. And it's quite clear in many passages in the Old Testament where it talks about Eved that the person is owned, is regarded as part of the property of that person. I think we are getting confused and reluctant to use the word slave because we think that because there is the word slave, that the Old Testament approves of slavery. And I think it's very much better to say that the Old Testament is trying to improve the life of slaves rather than pretending they're not slaves.
Okay. Anyone want any sort of clarification from the report? Okay, then I would ask Jack, you wanted to follow up with something quickly?
I don't think I disagree with anything that Gordon has said, and I'm not sure I disagree with very much that Peter has said. And that's the challenge that we're facing, and that as an American, the term slave is a term that is difficult to think of as a humanized institution at all. Although, surprisingly enough, some of my African American correspondents are less sensitive about that than I am.
So, Wayne, you want to ask or make a comment about the Old Testament side of things?
When we as scholars use the word slave, we have in mind something of a study of the background of slavery as it existed at the time of the Old Testament, slavery at the time of the New Testament, and we can understand nuances of it. But for the average English reader, the word slave has irredeemably negative association.